We are one. We are. We are one. We are. We are. And we are love. For we are one. We are, and we are light. We are. You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same. Will never be the same. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I will never be the same. Never be the same. Ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. Will never be the same, never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Hello and welcome to another SDAQ&A. I'm Peter Dixon, your host, and it's great to be here with you today. We're going to be exploring a very interesting topic. Carrie Johnson, who wrote I Was Canright's Secretary, which I have right here. And I've done several interviews with Nancy Page, Stephen Daly, and others actually, where we've talked about this particular book. And what I want to do today, though, and this was something I discovered this recording quite a long time ago. I'm not sure how, why, or when, but it's a recording where two Adventist apologists interview Carrie Johnson. And it's something that really shocked me at the time. I'm just bringing it up here so that as soon as we go for it, it will be easy to find. While I'm just doing that, let me know where you're watching from. And there we go. And how cold is it? And yeah, as I was saying, it may have actually been after my interview with Nancy Page, who is the granddaughter of Carrie Johnson. I had a very interesting interview with her in one of the seasons. If you look back, you'll find it. And she may have even mentioned this particular recording and that we're going to play today. So I'll get back to that in a minute. Got it ready to go. We're going to press the play button. And initially I was going to spend some time pausing it and giving my commentary as I went. But I realized when I spoke to Steve Daly in the interview I recently did with him, that this particular kind of material, once Adventists realize that it is up, there's a high chance of it disappearing. And I went looking for it after the interview and I couldn't find it. But the other day I went looking again, found it, and I thought, right, I've got to put this up as a resource in our SDA Q&A community for future generations to just watch. And that's why I'm not going to do the commentary as I go, because I want people to be able to access. Once this starts playing, we'll let it play. It's about 30 minutes. It'll just play start to finish, and it'll be a resource for people to just listen to, and they won't want to hear me banging on my 2 cents worth as we go. So yeah. Now, by the way, those watching on Facebook, do you mind putting a comment in there? Because it looks like the comments are not coming up again on Facebook. Very annoying, but I can see them on my other monitor. Yeah, so am I making sense? Yeah, I'm going to play it. Good resource for later. But afterwards, I'm going to read your comments and we'll have a little brief discussion about what we have just witnessed as we've listened to this. Now, someone's written, when will we hear it? Yeah, when I stop talking. So Deanna's watching from Tennessee. It's 11 p.m. and very chilly. Darren has written, the scenery there looks like Glen Innes. Very true. The scenery at the at the start there with the rocks and whatnot, that does look a lot like Glen Innes. And 32 degrees in Chicagoland. Thanks, Cindy Lou's watching. Linda's watching from Northern California. And Linda Johnson, I am a church SDA and really enjoy your programs. I'll bring that up on the screen. Thank you, Linda. I really appreciate that. I love doing them. Okay, it's John. Hey, John. When will we hear them? Yeah, when I stop talking, very soon. So, yeah, just a quick update. I am coming to California, Loma Linda, next week. It's come up very quickly. So there may or may not be shows next week. I will try my best to go live or upload something next week. There'll be something on Wednesday, but yeah, I think I leave on the Thursday. And I'll be going to the former Adventist Fellowship there in held at Loma Linda, I believe.
and I cannot wait. Thanks to James Andres, who has organised all of this and organised funding for me as well. I really appreciate that. So I cannot wait, and I've decided to pay. I'll bring it up. I need some donations, last minute donations, if possible. I'm getting the airfare and accommodation covered, and I would like to give something back to Jim Andreas there. So if there's some donations that have been coming through, I will forward that on to him. And also, I've decided to go for the full health insurance. That way, if something happens over there and I come away with a $15,000 hospital bill or something, it's covered. But that cost, and I'm going to cover that. That's my choice to go the full. But that is going to cost me 400 Australian, which I believe is around 600. I'm not sure, around 600 US. So if anyone's got some, and I still just decided to go for it. I don't have that kind of money, but I'm hoping that there's enough people that are keen to get me there to the former Adventist Fellowship and to meet a bunch of interesting people, to do some great interviews, to converse and share my story, and make a huge amount of wonderful new contacts. So if others, share in that dream of my doing so, there's the QR code there you can scan, and donations are greatly appreciated. So without further ado, is that how you say it? We will bring up this very historic recording. Just quickly, there's paypal.me/Peter Dixon Music if you'd like to contribute there. Hopefully we'll come up with those dollars for the health insurance before I leave. Okay, so those that have just joined us, we're going to listen to an interview with Carrie Johnson, who wrote this book, I Was Canright's Secretary. And I just want to say, I do have to share my humble opinion. This is one of the most disgraceful examples of Adventist apologists trying to destroy someone's character. The book, I Was a Canright's Secretary, is aimed at discrediting D.M. Canright, who left the Adventist Church, I think, 1887. And we won't go into too much detail, but he wrote some books that, did criticize Adventism. But what you will witness by listening to this recording, is Carrie herself and two other gentlemen bolstering her stories for 30 minutes, discrediting D.M. Canright in an absolutely shameful way, in my humble opinion. Absolutely shameful. If you look into ad hominem attacks, which basically means that you're attacking the person, the player, and not the ball. You're attacking the person, not their claims. And I believe if you stoop to that kind of an argument, you are revealing that you have a very weak argument or none at all if you stoop to that kind of behavior. And honestly, it's for me, it's hard to listen to this recording because I am ashamed that the church I once belonged to so often stoops to this kind of attack. It is disgusting. It is shameful. And the people who present this kind of material to defend Adventism by simply attacking another person, this is a character assassination in motion, and it was hugely effective. Hugely effective. You saw it play out with Des Ford after Glacier View and before. The things that Gillian and Des went through as far as character assassination were astounding, disgusting, shameful, dishonourable. And I hope that anyone that listens to this grasps what I'm saying, and just know that if someone is attacking a person without refuting any of their claims, that it usually means they don't have an argument. What does that say? Now, at the end of this, the guy who introduces the interview, I think he's one of the guys in doing the interview with Carrie Johnson as well, he takes it home even further. He just continues on, and I'm disappointed that this seems to be the default go-to Adventist apologist tool. And anyone who's left the church or spoken up against the church in any kind of way will have had this happen to them as well. Okay, after I said without further ado, I rambled for another 4 minutes. Okay, so I'm bringing it up onto the screen. There we go. You can find this online still at the moment if you go to audioverse.org. I hope I'm not breaching any copyright here. It does say that it's free sharing permitted under the Creative Commons license, so I'm sharing it in an educational kind of way, obviously. So I think we are covered. So again, thanks for joining me, everyone. I hope you enjoy today's episode, and please write in the comments and we'll look at them after. Okay, here we go. This is the historical interview of Carrie Johnson regarding Elder D.M. Canright. And just also let me know if you can hear it.
The interview you're about to hear was recorded in Michigan in the winter of 1970 while I was attending Andrews University. It was recorded on a reel-to-reel tape, and over the years some of the coding deteriorated, leaving the tape inaudible in a number of places. Thus it has been spliced together and re-recorded on cassette. However, even though the tape is of poor quality, the majority of the interview is still there and of great historical value. You will hear the voice and personal testimony of Mrs. Carrie Johnson, who was the private secretary of the late Elder D.M. Canright. In 1889, Canright published a 413-page book entitled Seventh-day Adventism Renounced. It is still in circulation today and is one of the most anti-Adventist books ever written. In fact, it can be said that all the present-day charges against Ellen White and the Seventh-day Adventist Church have basically come from the ink of D.M. Canright's pen. By the time Canright died in 1919, his book had gone through 14 printings and was widely circulated throughout the United States as well as many parts of the world. In this interview with Mrs. Carrie Johnson, you will hear her eyewitness account of the man few people ever knew. It is this personal documentation of Elder Dudley M. Canright that must be taken into account when reading his works. Joining me in the interview is Pastor Lyle Albrecht, a college classmate and personal friend. I'm going to ask Mrs. Johnson to come up here, and we're going to interview her and talk to her a little bit about some of the things that are not in this book that will be brought out.
hopefully by this camp meeting, that our press is running presently. Why don't you just step right in the middle here if you do that? You don't mind separating two good pastors.
Nice to be at the interior part of a sandwich.
That's the most important part, isn't it?
Right.
Mrs. Johnson here has had a real experience. As I recall, she told me that she was dying of leukemia, and I believe it was in the Battle Creek Sanitarium. Is that
Right.
correct? She was dying of leukemia, and she was taking to her grave probably one of the greatest insights that this church has ever had pertaining to D.M. Canright. Mrs. White has written many testimonies regarding D.M. Canright, but Mrs. Johnson had within her mind, while she lay there on that hospital bed, a story that would be of an utmost value to Seventh-day Adventist people such as you and me. And she told us some interesting things here. We don't have time to get into them, of how some of our leaders went there and tried to get from her these secrets that she had. She let it slip out, I think you said, that you had something to give. And anyway, the word got around. And before long, she had people there trying to get from her that secret that she had cherished so long. What was this secret?
The life of D.M. Canright was what was embodied in a diary that was in my possession, dated 1867. I believe that answers it.
We'll get into some of the things in that diary in just a moment. But first, a little more about this secret that she kept secret. She had made a pledge of loyalty, I believe, to him, did you not?
Not to him, but to the owner of the college in which I was at the time.
Okay, and you were working as a secretary at this time, right?
Right.
And you made a pledge to him that you would not do what?
That I wouldn't tell what I heard or what I saw in the office where he was going to place me as a secretary for an important ex-Adventist man. I didn't know who he was. I had seen him before, but I had never met him. And when I was introduced to him in this office, and I had made the loyalty pledge that I wouldn't repeat what I had seen or heard, and he took me in and he introduced me to D.M. Canright. Well, I had seen this man a few weeks before that because I was working in the Battle Creek Sanitarium in the kitchen. And there was a rather important personage that used to come in, and oftentimes it was on my duty to pick up his tray and seat him in a corner of the kitchen where he would get his meals. Now, he was provided with he could come in and get these meals free. I didn't know him, neither did the girls that were in the kitchen, but we named him Mr. X. And my surprise, of course, was that when I was introduced to Mr. Canright in this office, I knew him formerly as Mr. X.
This was quite a shock to you. Could you give them just a little description about what he looked like when you first saw him here in the cafeteria? Was he a wealthy man, a nice, groomed, clean-cut man?
Well, I knew to begin with that he was not a man that was on his own support because of the fact that he was coming in with courtesy tickets for his meals. They were provided free. And he wasn't permitted to eat in the dining room. He was only permitted to eat in the kitchen.
So you knew then that his source of income was relatively low.
And his appearance, of course, was in the same category. And at that time, he had an open socket in his head. His left eye was gone, and he didn't wear a patch. Once in a while, he'd wear a patch when he's out on the street or in church, but ordinarily, he said the patch was too hot, and he never wore it. But he was a man that, at the time that I met him, he had lost his wife that very night. And so he was in deep grief, and he just constantly cried, and it was very difficult for me to take his dictation.
Now, this dictation that you took for him this first time, had reference to his wife, was it not, in writing out of what?
He dictated her obituary.
He dictated the obituary, which was the first piece that you had
that I had taken
written from him. It might be interesting also to note where his wife spent the last year of her life. Was this under his support? Did he support her financially during this last year?
No, that she was living with her brother and sister.
Now, was Canright a Seventh-day Adventist at this time of his wife's death?
Was he?
Right.
No, he left the church in 1887.
Okay, so he was not a Seventh-day Adventist, but what was he? Did he belong to any denomination at this time?
Yes, he was very proud of the title, Pastor Emeritus of the Baptist Berean Church of Grand Rapids.
Now here he had dropped out quite some time before out of the Adventist church, and yet we find him coming back to the Adventist people for sympathy rather than going to the Baptists.
Sympathy and support, and the Battle Creek people, the Battle Creek Church, did raise funds for him and got him dressed up and clothes for the funeral.
So the Adventists then actually had an open heart toward him, even though at the time he had renounced the faith and
right.
He walked out knowingly.
He had many letters from the General Conference men in condolence, and also money contributions.
Let's go back just for a little bit and see what type of a person Canright was at the prime of his early experience in coming in to the Adventist message, and show what really took place that brought him to the position that we've just been speaking about. A man whose wife has to be supported by her brother, a man who physically is not able to take care of himself. He was a sickly man, and also eating from the meal tickets that were given to him through charity here. And let's go back just for a moment and see what kind of a person Canright was. One night he was sitting on a park bench in Chicago just after he had preached a dynamic sermon. I believe it was something about the new earth, the earth made new. But he had packed the auditorium when he was preaching. The balcony was filled. And as a young minister, he was in a class what we would call today a preaching practicum, where he was trying to preach. And he had a friend up there. Who was the friend in the balcony?
D.W. Revis. Some of the elder pure people here will know him too.
And so D.W. Revis was up here, and what was he supposed to be doing as Canright spoke?
He was commissioned, I guess you would call it, to listen and criticize Canright in this large audience. I understand that there were 1,300 people in this church in Chicago, where Elder Canright at that time was preaching. And D.W. Revis, he leaves the story, he has written a book on it, and he leaves the story that after the service was over, it was rather late at night, and they sat in the park because it was hot, and without any comment between them, all at once, DM, as I call him, DM Canright, said to Mr. Revis, he said, D.W., he says, if it wasn't for this message, I could become a great man.
Now, this was based upon what had taken place after his service that evening. I believe that he was detained out in the foyer for almost a half hour afterward, people congratulating him for such a great message
and
that he had given.
Asking him to return.
So do you feel that he had a little bit of pride in what he was able to do here?
Evidently, D.W. thought so, because he returned, he rebuked him by saying, DM, he said, it's the message that made you, and the day that you leave it, you will regret.
And he would also go back where he began.
Right.
At this time now, he was preaching a Seventh-day Adventist message, wasn't he?
Yes.
He was a Seventh-day Adventist preacher, because he gave this message at Chicago.
That was in the year 1879.
1879.
And from this, he did raise to a certain height within the denomination. He was also president of the Ohio Conference, if I remember correct.
He was not only, previous to his being a president in the conference, he had been one of three that was on the General Conference Committee.
So he was right up here with Elder James White
Right.
then. So he was personal friends with the Whites during this time.
Very much so. If you let me go back to the 1867 diary, which I have, in the year of 1867, on November 1, the Canrights were located in Norwich Walk, Maine, and they stayed at his home during a series of meetings for 6 weeks.
This was from November 1 till the following?
Until December 15th.
Okay. And during this time, it was quite interesting, as I too have read this experience, when Elder and Sister James White were coming there, and he mentions that they came and spent some time in his home, came specifically to his home. How did he receive them? Was he real happy about this, that they were coming?
He was, in his diary, he says, I'm glad they are coming, and but now I will have to devote myself to be a better man and go on, and I'll have to be more loyal. I'll have to be more, better in every way. It didn't last long.
Okay, here is the statement, actually, as it's quoted from October 20, on that Sunday morning when he said that he had learned that Brother and Sister White are coming to the camp. I will, by the help of God, now make a reformation in my life. Now, this wasn't unusual for him to do this, was it? It seemed like he was always making new resolutions in his life almost every other day.
Every day.
Every day. Okay. And he says, by the help of God, now he is going to make a new start, new reformation in my life. I'm going to be more devoted, study more, and be more regular in all things. Lord, help me now. He said, now this was as he knew that Elder and Mrs. White were coming. Now, when they came, he was thrilled at first, like you mentioned. And then suddenly, what happened?
Well, every other day he had a different statement. Often he would say that he never loved Brother and Sister White so much before. And then he would make a statement in a few days after to the effect that he just wondered if they were doing right. And then another statement he made, I'm afraid that God is confusing me.
There was one point here where he speaks of his wife. She was crying profusely one night. And after this, he says here on Sabbath, November 16, 1867, I fear that God has left me. Right after that, he says, I am learning much and gaining confidence in Brother and Sister White. He had gone down again, and now he was right back up where he was before. But then he finalized, supposedly here on Sunday, December 8th, to have a good confidence, and he says, I now have perfect confidence in Brother and Sister White. In spite of all of this, notice what Mrs. White speaks in regards to Elder Canright as she writes this letter to him down at the close. Would you read that right here, where it's underlined?
I love your soul, and the soul of your wife, and the souls of your innocent children, and this is why I now address you. Yours with much sorrow and pity and love, Ellen White.
This was written on April 20, 1888. Here Mrs. White had real compassion for this man, even though he was constantly trying to get his feet on good solid ground. And day after day in the diary, it almost made you depressed. Today was a gloomy day, and so was he. Today it was windy and rainy. That's the way he felt. Depressed, downcast. If the day was bright and sunny, oftentimes the feeling of this would make him go out and spur him on. Let's come back here with your experience with him as you were about 18 years of age as his secretary. How was Elder Canright's experience and his relationship to Ellen White? We've shown here now how Ellen White loved him, was continually working with him and trying to get his feet on solid ground. But how was Canright's experience and his relationship with Ellen White when you knew him back there in the office?
It's a little bit odd, because at that time I knew very little as to who Mrs. White was. I knew that she was an old woman. I knew that she was in California, but what her office was in the church or anything like that, you see, I wasn't an Adventist too long. And But he was preparing the Life of Mrs. E.G. White, which I took dictation for. And he had every kind of name that you could think of for her. And that had an impression upon me that she must be an awful person, for the reason that he called her uneducated, he called her false, he called her sickly, he called her everything that you could think of. Two items that comes to my mind, and that is he called her a monomaniac, if you know what that is. I don't know that I do. And he called her a kleptomaniac and a false female pope.
We've already noted now the very kind and gentle way in which Ellen White spoke and wrote to D.M. Canright.
Right.
Even though she reproved him at times, always in a very kindly Christian attitude with much love. Those who knew Ellen White very best, who lived at the time she did and wrote, would bear this out, that this is the kind of person she was. Tell us now then, how did Mr. Canright treat you as a young girl, as secretary for him in his office? How was your relationship?
Well, I could have been a robot, and as far as he was concerned, as far as treatment is concerned.
Now, what do you mean? Would you specify that?
Well, he never said good morning or never said good night.
Kind of acted like you didn't exist
I
then?
just didn't exist.
How did this make you feel?
Well, I think I felt very well about it because I felt the same way about him.
There was one time in the early experience here, as I recall, when he asked you to mail out some envelopes and letters and such. And if I recall right, you had taken some strange little pamphlets that happened to be Adventist pamphlets, and you were mailing these for his correspondence, but he wasn't really in favor of Adventism at this time. He was kind of against it. And yet you were doing correspondence, filling these envelopes with Adventist literature, unbeknown to you. But one day something happened. Some of those envelopes came back to you, and he opened them up, did he not?
The regular routine, of course, was in the mornings we would be writing on personal correspondence. But his correspondence, as a rule, was heavy, and he had a mimeograph sheet that I would enclose, and also at that time he had 10 tracts that he had written that were against the Adventists, and he would state enclosed number so-and-so or such numbers, which I did. And so one day there were 3 letters that came back, and he opened them, and he fondled them and had to cry over them. He cried all the time, and he had to cry a while, and I didn't know what they were, but he says, now this is just what I wanted to have put in, but I couldn't say it. So I investigated what it was that I had put in, and it was a Sabbath tract that I had included.
A good, solid Adventist message, in other words.
Right.
And yet he made this statement that this is the way he wanted
That
it.
he wanted it, but I couldn't say it.
So what did you do from then on in his correspondence?
Well,
what did you ask him?
I asked him, I says, well, how did you want it? And he says, well, I can't say it the way I want it.
And so what did you do?
So I decided to do as I wanted to do, and I put them in, all of them.
You feel then that there must have been or might have been some power that actually was possessing him by the way he acted in your presence in the office many times, and by the very statement that we've just suggested here of how this isn't the way he wanted it, and yet this is the way it had to be. Do you feel that there was a power that was possessing
Well,
him?
he was possessed by a supernatural power. And, of course, since then, I've learned very well that Sister White was possessed by a supernatural power. But 2 different spirits, because he was very normal, as far as I knew then, when he was dictating any other material other than when he was writing on the life of Sister White, when he was calling her all these types of names. And during that period of time, he would be surrounded with what I call a fog, he was visible through it. But when that would occur, why, you could just feel that there was no air in the room whatsoever. There was just no breathing, and I was just crushed, you might say. So I couldn't look at the apparition that was going on, even though I was taking his dictation. But his voice was an entirely different tone of voice than his natural voice. And I would turn myself to the wall and take his dictation that way.
After he would dictate his letters to you against the Seventh-day Adventist Church, his writings against Ellen White, and then after he would finish, can you tell us what he would do then? Or
well, after he'd come out of this apparition, is that what you want?
Yes. Yeah, you might tell us a little about
well,
that.
Well, when he'd come out of this apparition, why, he would be just covered with perspiration, and he was weak and limp, and he would fall into his chair opposite from my desk, and then he would cry out in a most desperate way. He'd throw his left arm out, and he'd say, "I'm a lost man. I'm a lost man. I'm a lost man," 3 different times in a most pathetic. I thought I never would forget the tone of voice, but it haunted me many years.
Would he say something in regard to Ellen White at this time?
She was a good woman. She was a noble woman. And then he would, when he seemed to get his strength, why, he'd pick up his cane and his hat and his little satchel, and then he'd say something about what that text doesn't come to my mind, but who will deliver me from the body of this death? There are 3 items, and 2 come to my mind about her prophecy that she had written to him prophetically. And one was, "Be sure that your son will fade in obscurity."
Right here, let's read it. Why don't you read it to them, Lyle? This is taken from Selected Messages, Book 2, page 163.
Here's a letter written by Ellen White to D.M. Canright, pleading with him, actually, to change his course and to give his heart to God and become a real power in the Adventist ministry as he had been before. Letter written October 15, 1880. And as she goes on, then she makes a prediction about something that will happen to Canright if he goes on in the way he is and doesn't turn back to the truth as he knew it. She says, "You have wanted to be too much, to make a show and a noise in the world, and as a result, your son will surely set in obscurity."
And this is truly what happened, is this not right?
It did. It's a long story, but it did. But the other prophecy that she made that comes to my mind is, she said, any man who dares to make the statements that you do, the atmosphere surrounding him is like a poisonous miasma. And I experienced that poisonous miasma. As far as his dying in obscurity, maybe we should tell
us just briefly
where he is.
Just the end part here, I think we have time for, where what you discovered. Where did he die? And was he in a big funeral? Was there a big funeral held for him?
His entire family became Christian Scientists. And he had one daughter who was a practitioner. And they lived in Hillsdale, and he was with them, these daughters. And they wouldn't permit, of course, having any medical help for him, because all he needed to do was to concentrate, and he'd be all right. And so he died there without any medical help. He died at night when there was no one with him. And he had made arrangements ahead of time with an undertaker in Hillsdale that his body be taken to Otsego, where they had a family lot. And the practitioner put out a story in the newspaper to the effect that there were 5 Baptist preachers and a huge funeral that took place in Otsego, where there was only his immediate family and a service read by the Christian Science
reader.
reader. I have a nephew that lives across the street practically from this church, and I consulted this nephew as to about that large funeral. And he said, well, I didn't even know that Uncle Dudley was buried here until you told me. And he said, 5 preachers? Why, he said, I'm his nephew. He said, I didn't even know that there was a funeral.
So here his own nephew didn't even know that he was buried there. And this came about through her own investigation. This story, I believe, is in the book, is it not? Where he is buried.
Yeah.
And a little bit of the background here. So it's quite interesting in fulfillment of what has been read here, that he truly did die in obscurity. No one even knew. The Baptists didn't even know where he was buried. And he's right not too far from the Baptist church. Is that right? Around in the area there. And they had no idea where he was buried. And many of the Adventists didn't even know where he was buried. And on his tombstone is an interesting little statement.
It was what he had left with this undertaker is what he wanted put on the tombstone, and that was Elder D.M. Canright, an author of world renown.
So is that a Baptist terminology for a Baptist minister? The Baptist minister died. What might we expect on his tombstone?
Well, I was in the habit of writing his letters under Reverend D.M. Canright.
Reverend Canright. This is how they would term their clergy. But this man on his tombstone, when he died, wanted to...
He left his message in an envelope and gave it to the undertaker. That's what he wanted put on the
Elder Canright.
Elder Canright.
This has been most interesting, I'm sure, to most of you this morning, to listen to her, his private secretary and personal secretary, during his last years there of life. But I'd like to share one other thing in closing here with you this morning, and this we have not dealt with, but this comes back to the testimonies that we have verified here from what she has said regarding Elder Canright. The very thing that she said would happen did happen explicitly. This was written on Friday, February 1, 1867. Today, Friday, is my Sabbath. I have resolved to take every Friday for a rest day. Rather interesting, he was an elder in the Adventist church at that time, ordained just a year or so before he made this statement. It's quite interesting. 2 years before, and now he had lost faith not only in the spirit of prophecy, but as well as in the Bible itself, no longer keeping the seventh day as a Sabbath. He went to church on the Sabbath, but as far as he was concerned, throughout his diary, you get the impression, anyway, that Friday was his day off, his day that was set aside for God.
In this historical documentation, you've heard with your own ears the testimony of one who not only knew D.M. Canright personally, but took his dictation and saw the physical changes that came over his body when he spoke against Ellen White. The fog that she spoke of was like the fog which we drove through that morning on our way to the interview. She told us that the fog was like a cloud or a vapor that would completely surround him when he spoke his dictation against Ellen. And from within this poisonous miasma or vaporous cloud, a voice would come forth that was not that of D.M. It was a different voice entirely that would speak through him and dictate the messages against Ellen and her writings. In fact, Carrie told us that this experience haunted her for years. And during Canright's dictation on other issues, he seemed quite normal. But when talking about Ellen, another power took over and spoke through him, and you heard her personal testimony where she said that she believed he was actually possessed. And according to the Spiritualist Manual, the phenomena of spiritualism not only includes the gift of tongues or speaking in an unknown dialect, but voice, where the person in trance is actually used as a channel through which an outside force speaks an intelligent language. Now, beloved, if the negative messages that have been leveled against Ellen White and the Seventh-day Adventist movement were actually inspired by the forces of evil, as this interview would indicate, then I would be for making some very serious changes in my library if I had any such material. As we close this record on Canright, let me share once again from the pages of recorded history. In Canright's post-Adventist years, we're told that he exhibited an almost Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde attitude toward Seventh-day Adventists. Publicly, and to his immediate family, He maintained that he was happy to have been delivered from Adventist bondage and never once regretted the course of action begun in 1887. Yet he maintained cordial relations with some old Adventist friends, attended Adventist meetings frequently, especially in the last decade of his life, and reportedly told many Adventist acquaintances that they had the truth, quote unquote, and should never let it go. One of the most moving experiences is recorded by D.W. Revis, to whom Canright years earlier had confided that he believed he could be a great man were it not for our unpopular message. At the end of a long, frank talk one day in 1903, Revis appealed to Canright to confess his errors to his Adventist brethren and once again join them in heralding Christ's final message to the world. I never heard anyone weep and moan in such deep contrition as that once leading light in our message did, Revis remembered. He said he wished he could come back to the fold, as I suggested. But after long, heartbreaking moans and weeping, he said, and I'm quoting, "I would be glad to come back, but I can't. It's too late. I am forever gone. Gone." Canright's parting words to Revis were, and I quote, "Whatever you do, don't ever fight the message," end quote. Canright's attitude toward Ellen White also appeared to have been ambivalent. His life of Mrs. E.G. White was certainly derogatory, yet several years before this was issued, he told L.H. Christian that he had never met a woman so godly and kind and at the same time so unselfish, helpful, and practical as Mrs. White. She was certainly a spiritual woman, a woman of prayer and deep faith in the Lord Jesus. Anyone who follows her writings, he continued, in prayer and faith will certainly get to heaven. She always exalted Jesus, and she taught true conversion and genuine sanctification as few others have, end quote. Just 4 years before his death, with his Adventist brother, Jasper, Canright attended Ellen White's funeral in the Battle Creek Tabernacle Church. 2 times the brothers joined the line of mourners to pass by her casket, and brokenly Canright was heard to say, and I quote, "There is a noble Christian woman gone."
There you go. It just escalates with this higher moral ground, shameful personal attack on D.M. Canright. I'm going to read a couple of things from Dowdy's book, also a couple of things that he said himself, Canright there, and that last line that near the end there, whoever that was presenting, where he said, the claim is that Canright said to this other guy, "Whatever you do, don't fight the message." It's just. I think I've said shameful several times, but is it dishonorable? That kind of ad hominem attack. It's just disgusting. Okay, so I took a couple of notes there. Those that have joined us late, we've just been listening to this lady, Carrie Johnson, who wrote, I was Canright's secretary. I've interviewed Nancy Page on the program, Steve Daly, and you can look those up and find out more information about this content there. But this recording was done in 1971, I believe, and it's an interview with 2 Adventist apologists, obviously with a mission to defend the faith, the message. And I've had several people say to me that they fear that this content will be taken down. So that's why I wanted to record it here for posterity if it is removed. I did find it hard to find this last time I went looking for it. So a couple of thoughts, and I'd love your comments. Please put them in the sidebar there in the comments section. And you might like to comment on some of the things I'm about to say, and you also might have a bunch of things that you'd like to say on your own there. Already some great comments and questions coming through. I'll get to them in a moment. But this is kind of for those that like researching. You might be able to help me with a couple of these things. And Nancy, if you're watching later, you might be able to help with some of these. I know you've listened to this recording as well. They highlight at the start that Carrie Johnson at some point was dying of leukemia. I think I'm right. And word got out that she had this news, these secrets to tell about who knows what. And as the rumors spread, it became apparent that she had some inside information about Canright. And so people visited her. There's no mention of Arthur White, but when I've talked to Nancy and when you read the book, apparently he had a lot to do with the book. I Was Canright's Secretary. So my question here is, if she was dying of leukemia, hadn't released this book, people coming and she eventually said, okay, I will share this information. Didn't the book take another 20 years to be printed? Oh, yeah, I'm not sure where I got that date from, but wasn't there a longer period of time? Sorry, didn't it take about 20 years to produce the book? So did she live another 20 years because of some kind of miraculous healing from leukemia? Had she... yeah, it definitely was. I remember Nancy saying the book itself was about 20 years in the making, and I think it was released in 1970. But I'm pretty sure, please research for me, when was she dying of leukemia? She also mentions there, I think I heard it right, that she had access. She said, I have his diary. And I know I've talked to Naomi and Steve Daly about that. And she didn't pass it on to Nancy when she died. I think it's at the vaults there still, maybe at Andrews. Yeah, maybe we can look into that. Interesting that she talks about breaking her pledge there. She took an oath, a loyalty pledge. What does that say about someone? If you've taken a pledge to keep information private because you've accepted a job working for that person or the business that's employed you, and that's the kind of thing I would imagine that you take to your grave. An honourable person would do so, I think. Particularly if when you break that pledge, you're not refuting any of the claims that were made, you're simply attacking the person. So it's a hatchet job. You've broken your pledge to do a hatchet job on someone that years later have proven to be unjustifiable. Shameful. Shame on you. She mentions also about a missing eye that he had. I'd like a bit more information about that if people could research that. She also said the first thing that she dictated was his wife's obituary. So that would be and I think it was his second wife. His first wife died. That would be an interesting thing to track down. When did his second wife actually die? When was the obituary printed? Because then you'd be able to kind of zero in on the time that she was given that information, because there is some doubt that she was even his secretary. But my point today is not to be talking about that stuff. My point today is to highlight the shameful use of character assassination that Adventist apologists love to stoop to. I've had it against me. One of the guys says, Ellen often rebuked Canright kindly and with much love. She also rebuked him publicly and embarrassingly many times as well. Carrie says there, he cried all the time. Oh dear. Then they say, but was there a power that started possessing him? And I'm thinking, okay, they're escalating now. And people have said this about Des Ford too. that, yeah, he was probably devil possessed. Why are we humans so stupid? We are stupid little sheeples. She then says, since then, I've learnt. Oh, sorry. She says, he was possessed by a supernatural power. Since then, I've learnt that Ellen was possessed by a supernatural power, but a different kind. To even say that Ellen was possessed, she's possessed by a good God. Oh, dear. Can't read my own writing. Oh, that's right. She said also that he was surrounded by a fog. She could still see through it to him, but he was surrounded. Like, no, this is not an imaginary fog. She's now saying, as the urban myth grows, that there he was dictating messages to her and things that she had to write down, and he was surrounded by a fog. And then she said, his voice became totally different, a totally different type of voice. Oh, dear. It gets comical. Like, okay, so if you're in a room and you're dictating this stuff, he's possessed by the devil. He is, his voice is changing, and literally a fog begins to surround him. So what she says, she just turned her back and continued dictating. Come off it. If you're working in someone's office and a fog appears around them and their voice goes, you are going to race out that room. You're not going to go, ooh, politely turn around and just pretend you can't see it. Ridiculous. Oh, dear. And then she says that he would often, when he'd come out of these trance, like, what did she call them? I can't remember. He would often repeat, and she said that he would do it 3 times. He'd say over, I am a lost man. I am a lost man. I am a lost man. Oh, dear. She's making him sound pathetic. Now, I want to read. This is from this book, where Canright himself knows that Adventists, even in his lifetime, that this is what they're doing. They're aiming to just demonize him, to shoot his character down. So he writes this, and at this point, he's pastor emeritus of the Berrien Baptist Church, Grand Rapids in Michigan. By the way, when you read his material, he certainly doesn't come across as someone that flip-flops. He doesn't come across as someone that's hurtful, hateful. He is actually talking about the claims and refuting the claims. His first book, I think, is it Adventism Renounced? Refuted? Okay, so this is from this book by D.M. Canright. Since I withdrew from the Adventists over sorry, I'm still chuckling. Oh, dear. Over that fog thing. Since I withdrew from the Adventists over 30 years ago, they have continued to report that I've regretted leaving them, have tried to get back again, have repudiated my book which I wrote, and have confessed that I am now a lost man. There has never been a word of truth in any of these reports, he says. I expect them to report that I recanted on my deathbed. All this is done to hinder the influence of my books. I now reaffirm all that I have written in my books and tracts against that doctrine. See, not the people, the doctrine. Several Advent ministers have rendered valuable aid in preparing this page. Sorry, it goes on about that. I'm going to come to, in a moment, this incredible book written by Dowdy, Norman F. Dowdy, released in 1964, as he was witnessing the character assassination of Dudley. Not an Adventist, this guy, not an Adventist. Difficult book to find. Highly recommend it if you do. But he defended him and spent hours finding factual information to do so. So Ellen said to him, and Carrie in that interview agrees. Ellen said, "Your son will set in obscurity." I don't know where she copied that from, but that's what she claimed. And so they go on to say that he will have a lonely death. And Carrie goes to great lengths to chat about how he did die a lonely death with a tiny little gravestone, only attended by a handful of family members, and that even some of his relatives didn't even know that he had died. So in this book, I can't find the cover for it. At one point, it was in a library somewhere. Sorry about that, but I think Adrian gifted it to me. Thank you, Adrian Anderson. And I don't think I'm not suggesting he stole it from the library. But anyway, in this book, there's heaps of things in one of the chapters where people are saying what a great guy Canright was. And where am I? So these are just like short little excerpts from letters that he discovered. And this one I'm reading simply to confirm that it wasn't just a tiny little funeral. He goes, "So you're having inquiries about our good old brother Canright. Well, I used to have them quite frequently when I was pastor at Berrien." That's the Baptist church we mentioned earlier. "The dear old brother was true to the faith once for all delivered to the saints to the very end. He did not recant on his deathbed. I used to call him before he died and was present and took part in his funeral services." And there's a few more like that as well. Now, I'm going to read one thing in this book, the Dowdy book. He writes a chapter called Canright's secretary. Legally, he was not able to mention her name, and eventually the Adventists did win the case about him with him being able to publish this, and it was taken off the shelves. That's why if you find one of these, it is super rare. Maybe it's free online somewhere, I don't know. Okay. So I just want to read the last little paragraph. In that chapter, there's at least, it's not worth counting, but 6 or 7 pages about his meeting with Carrie Johnson, who we just heard talking at one of the camp meetings. And by all accounts, she was wheeled out and enjoyed it, loved it. I don't know if she made a lot of money from royalties. Who knows? Someone has, because it's still available to this day. I was Canright's secretary. Go and ask for it in the local ABC. They'll get it in for you. Okay, so I want to just read this last 2 paragraphs from the Dowdy book, because it raises some questions about the authenticity of Carrie Johnson. So he's just done a whole lot of reporting on her, and details 24 instances where she is of misstatements. And he says, here then are 24 instances of misstatement on the part of Canright's secretary. I have others on hand which I have not introduced because there was no reason to do so. But now the reader may draw his own conclusions as to the value of this woman's witness against Mr. Canright. She has declared him to be the very opposite of what those who knew him intimately and over long periods declared him to be. At that same time, she has made claims for herself as a witness that are totally insupportable. She has even resorted to deceit in order to procure data which she hoped would assist her in disparaging him. And throughout, she has revealed her inaccuracy in a multiplicity of details on the circumstances of his history. Yes, this is the party cited by one of the authors of Questions on Doctrine in order to discredit Canright. She told me in my home on May 5, 1962, that this author had written her repeatedly for data on him. When I wrote to him what I had discovered about her unreliability, he professed to have no need of any information she possessed. Documentation which I had sent him on the charges he had made apart from her testimony, he ignored. Impartial men can judge the morality of such procedures. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I didn't realize I would feel so much about this. I read it and I felt disgusted. And then I thought, well, but as I actually share that with you guys and listen to, I feel, someone wrote somewhere grubby. I feel grubby even immersing into that. And I read that book. I was Canright's secretary well before I left the Adventist Church. I wouldn't say I was influenced by it. It did have some warning bells in my mind. But what that book has done to discredit him has just been, very untoward. And it's quite moving to immerse yourself back into that. Okay, so we're going to just look at some of your comments now. I'd love to see what you guys have been saying. Probably I could do with a glass of water, but there is none at hand. So we won't go too much longer, but I will just read some of these comments. I think Steve Beagles wrote, I think Canright was a good Christian man. There is no point in attempting to assassinate his character, as the E.G. White estate has done. He is interesting because of his close relationship with James White. That's true, Stephen. And did you notice in that whole 34 minutes, zero attempt to refute the claims, to raise the claims? Zero attempt. So be careful when you hear people attacking someone else without being able to challenge the claims that they are making. That's warning bells that you hear in the back of your head. You might have suppressed them so far, way back, but that's little bells going, something's wrong here. These guys don't have an argument. What's going on? Ray asks, was Johnson paid to lie? Well, I'm not sure. I think when I chatted to Naomi, I'm not sure it was about the money so much as perhaps the fame. But she, look, surely she would have got royalties. Adventists are honourable with their royalty payments, so I must ask her more about that. Adrian, good to see you. Adrian has written, 100% agree with your opinion there, Peter. Disgusting. And Deanna has written, boy, it must be after midnight now for you, Deanna. Thanks for bringing this to us. My pleasure. This is Debbie Hooper. She has written, commentary like this is a common thought-ending strategy. So true. When you deconstruct someone's reputation in this way, you're effectively giving people a reason to take no notice of the critique. You don't have to listen to this person who is bitter, hurt, crazy, unbalanced, because his or her intent is malicious. This means that the issues are not taken seriously and people don't inquire further. Just can't see that. They don't further inquire, I guess. Yeah. While it's interesting that while they are shooting him down in flames with false allegations and assessments, they're chipping in there with some real great elevate Ellen to the higher pedestals. Andy Mack, all the way from West on Australia. How horrendous. I'm glad I'm moving away from the church. Love to have you on the program, Andy, to share what's going on for you right now in real time. And who wrote this one? Sorry, just going back. This is John. How are you, John C. Yerma? That kind of presentation makes me feel like vomiting. Yeah. I've got a guttural feeling going on right now. Disgust, nausea, and humour for some reason. And Dave Wilmoth was the one who said grubby. Yeah. And thank you, Deanna Leeds has written, regrettably, it is too easy to destroy a person's character in the name of religion and get away with it. Hearts of stone have no empathy or conscience. Moral integrity and accountability are non-existent. People can become like ravenous wolves seeking to destroy good people by twisting and turning the truth until it is crushed to a pulp. Carrie used her wild and evil imagination to pile up lie upon lie and cruelly trammeled and crushed Canright. Carrie bathed in the recognition she gained through her shameful character assassination. That is so true, Deanna. And look, even if she wanted to criticize him but also write and bring in academics and scholars and theologians of the day to refute his claims, you fine, fair enough. But to extrapolate into, I think, obvious fraudulent commentary that she saw a fog go around him and his voice changed and he was possessed. That is ridiculous. Now, some people say, well, hey, he's saying that the devil doesn't work in those kinds of ways. Look, I'm not even going to go there. Just use your discerning brain. You don't have to think too deeply to realize that she's extrapolating on an urban myth that she largely created. Many others joined her. John C. Yerma has written, Willard Santee. Now, I remember how during the 80s, when I was following his CB theology via audio tapes, so many people were influenced by his talks. I haven't heard of him. Tell us more. Jesse Task has written Missing Leg. That was in Steve's material? I don't think it's in her book, but she had talked about it later and was clearly wrong. He did lose a leg later, but my understanding is not at the time when he would have been, where she was allegedly his secretary. What types of talks did Santee give? Jennifer writes, we knew them, but I probably wasn't paying much attention back then. I guess that's to the Santee talks. I must look into that. Sounds interesting. And Adrian writes, shh, don't tell anyone that you weren't listening. Oh, good. Adrian has also written here. Thank you. I'm glad. I didn't realise this. But Dowdy's book, The Case of D.M. Canright, is free to download at that address. I think, so archive.org. Is that where this audio was? Anyway, can't remember. Dale Hutchings, hello from Bakersfield. Good to see you, Dale. I hope you're enjoying those CDs that finally got to you. And I appreciate your donations as well. You've been very supportive. Thank you so much. Will you be at Loma Linda for the Former Adventist Fellowship? I'd love to catch up and shake your hand if you are. I could have delivered the CDs personally. And this is Linda Johnson, and she has written, this was character assassination for sure. If what she said was true, he may have been clinically depressed. Little knowledge about it in those days. She was out to destroy him in any case. Yeah, and along with all the other Adventist leaders and pastors who to this day, if they know about this and they disagree with the ad hominem attack but remain silent, yeah, you're involved. Sorry about that. The old warning is true. Don't believe in anything you hear and only half of what you see. Yes. So all she said is discounted. Yeah. And like I said, look, even if it's not discounted, let's just say that it's that there's facts there. And I'm not saying there is, but the use of ad hominem attack on someone without any kind of refutation of the person's claims or beliefs is clearly an immoral kind of attack. It's immoral. It's breaking the 9th commandment. You're bearing a false witness, Adventists who support this kind of thing. You're bearing a false witness. You're breaking the commandments. Your salvation is in jeopardy. I think, I don't mind a bit of, biffo back and forth. But if you can't back it up with factual claims, goodness me. And we've got Cash Rich. Hi, Peter. This is Karen in the UK. Thank you for another interesting presentation. Thank you, Karen. And because we're a bit later today, you probably got a chance to, watch live. And Andy Mack says, good idea to coming on to the show. Mevin has your details. Wow, good. Tell him to text me your mobile number. I never answer. If you try and call me, I never answer. I have talking on the phone phobia. Can't do it. Don't want to do it. Refuse to do it. So message me, email me, send me a text. And I do apologize for those who have tried to contact me and I don't reply. I am one of the worst correspondents on the planet. I blame being a muso. I do apologize for my disorganization. If it wasn't for Adrian Anderson, the last 6 to 9 months. I don't think there would have been any shows. So thank you, Adrian, for your hard work in keeping me on track. Jason Bender, hello, Wisconsin. Every time I ask questions, they don't want to answer any questions to me in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They tell me to ask my neighbours who are Adventist. And thank you, Jason. And when I ask Adventists to come on the program that are Adventist employees, pastors, ordained, they're reticent to come on as well. When I say, I just want to understand the sanctuary a little bit better. Can you explain what the sanctuary doctrine is? No, they won't. Because they don't want the curly questions. Apparently I ask curly questions. This is from Jennifer. Hey, Jennifer. These Wednesday programs are supposed to only be an hour. But, you know, you don't have to watch the whole thing. Watch a minute. Watch 3 seconds. Watch whatever your brain is wired to watch. Some people like to watch the whole thing. Some like engaging in the community we're building through these discussions. Just poke your head in. Say hi. Click a like button or subscribe, though, because that really helps the algorithms. The new magic number, according to YouTube, is if a show reaches 2,000 views, it really helps. So you have 1,000 subscribers and 2,000 views, and that really helps the algorithms. So thanks. This is, as I said, I think, Jennifer Quick, thank you. How many more character assassinations are out there and will never be known? Wow, what a great point. Exactly. Like as someone on the small level of the playing field as me, you know, no one would even notice the character assassinations. So, yeah. Oh, Dale says he may make it to the Loma Linda Former Adventist Fellowship, where I will be, not this weekend, the one after. You're about 21 hours? What? I don't get that. 21-2 hours away. This is Peter Mashenko. Ad hominem attack. Phrase of the decade on SDAQ&A. Well, you know, I like to think that I know some big words. And Peter adds, we still love you even if you don't answer your phone, Pete. Peter Mashenko, you've been in that situation. I don't sit there and see a name come up and ignore it. I just have it on silent. I just don't look at it. And I have the notifications turned off. And so I have to go in later and check. And Dale said, bring me a coffee cup. I will. I'll put, I think, 1 or 2 left. I'll even wash this one if it's the last one. I'll bring it and I'll give it to you at Loma Linda. I must remember to do that. I'd be happy to do that. Jason Bender has written, here in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, or the church, we do not have Vespers anymore, and the men don't have Bible studies anymore during the weekday. The church is closed until Saturday. Peter Mashenko again. We like listening to your dulcet tones, Peter. That's why we stick around or tune in to hear you ramble and read the comments. Yes, I'm great in meditation classes because I'm told that my music and my talking puts people to sleep. So, yeah. Dale, 2.5 hours. Oh, that is a drive. But I'm 17 hours away. So, yeah. And thanks. Peter has added, you're providing community service against loneliness yesterday well through these sessions. Oh, dear. Classic. Oh, yes. And Peter, I've put a cup aside for you. Definitely have. Next time we catch up at Double Take, I'll bring it to you. Thank you, everyone, so much for watching today. We've been looking at a very important piece of history, and I recommend that everyone go and I'm building up a stack of books that I recommended myself and Angela Lima. If you're watching, Angela, get ready. We're going to get on the show and we're going to bring out books that we've found very influential for our journey. But yeah, we've been listening today to, I was Canright Secretary Carrie Johnson, an interview she did in 1970-71, and how, the attack the player, not the ball, was very obvious. Why not go and look up this? I think, Adrian, that's online as well. The Life of Mrs. Ellen G. White, Her False Claims Refuted. Can someone message me also? And I think I did ask Adrian. Oops. What are the 3 books Bob Brinsmead? Seventh-day Adventism, 1844 Re-Examined, Sabbath Re-Examined, and something about Jesus. If someone could send me those, I'd love that. And thank you, John. John has said it's been great. Peter, really enjoyed today. Tell me, are you Avondale Music? Yes, I am Avondale Music. So if you do go to make a contribution to my trip next week, I'm trying to raise 400 Australian dollars by Friday. Is that possible? Because I've opted to have quite expensive health insurance for when I travel. I think it's a good thing to do. So, yeah, that's my details. And it will probably come up as Avondale Music. That's my trading name as a sole trader. So, yeah, there or up at the little donation. Where is it? There we go. Up in the donations. You can scan that QR code there. And 3 people have made a donation today already. I really appreciate that. Thank you. So, yeah. So the last book, and look, I'm so glad that Adrian put in the links earlier, this book, The Case of D.M. Canright. This guy, worked so hard to put together this book, released in 1964, shut down by the church soon after. So, yeah, go and check it out. Again, thank you everyone for your support today. I've had a good chat. I enjoy these reaction videos, and if I put you to sleep, that's great. Mission accomplished. So, yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. I am interviewing Hal Southwell, and I cannot wait. He has written so many interesting comments and posts, and he is my very special guest tomorrow at Sydney time. Will be Thursday 12:30 lunchtime, LA time back to our 5:30 p.m. on the Wednesday. But yeah, join me for Hal Southwell. He has written some incredible comments and statements and thoughts in SDAQ&A in the Facebook group. So join me tomorrow for that incredible interview. Just checking. Who wrote this? I can't see anymore because I've logged out of that part. Looking forward to reading The Case of Peter Dixon. The Case of Peter Dixon. Yes. Look, honestly, as long as the people I've interviewed, some of the content I've raised, I'm pretty sure I'm forgettable. So there won't need to be that kind of a case. I can tell you 2 funny stories of 2 times where I was totally forgotten, and I'm okay with it. This happened early on in my life, and I live with that. 4 influential books Oh, thanks, Adrian. I'm just bringing them up on the screen because I do want to check these out. Are they online? One last quick question, Adrian, while I've got you. Plain Truth and Verdict, those magazines, are they online anywhere? He wrote, 1844 re-examined, judged by the gospel, Sabbatarianism re-examined. Oh, and the pattern of redemptive history. Appreciate that. Till tomorrow, everyone. Can't wait. See you in not that long a time. Chat then.